Yo, guys, hey, welcome to Embrace the Power Coast Connection. We got Kristen on today. We're going to talk about yoga. Before we get started, I want to give a massive shout out to the works. I appreciate what you guys, 24-hour works over at Boyette. You guys did a massive shout out for Embrace the Power, so we want to say thank you. And we're going to be there constantly at 24 hours in the morning. If you want to meet me, you got to be there at 3 a.m. because that's when I hit it. Hey, Kristen, how are you doing?
How are you? I don't think I'll be there at 3 a.m., Vince. I'm sorry.
Hey, but I'll be there at 5 tomorrow. So I'll be there at 5 tomorrow. So me and Mike G down here at the Rack Studios. And if you're looking for a mortgage for anybody out there, Rack is the way to go. And me and Mike are here just grinding, about to have a great time. So Kristen, where are you located? And where are you located and how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. I'm in Lithia and I teach yoga currently at Karma Yoga and Fitness in Riverview. It's a new location and it's been a great move for us. We moved from the River Hills Marketplace, which was right off Lithia Pinecrest near the brunchery. And now with the new Riverview location, our classes are getting bigger and bigger. So it's been a terrific move for us.
You got better parking is all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I know. You're right. Yeah, much better.
You got better parking. So did you always be, or were you always into yoga, or did you how did you progress into it? Like from your childhood, did you ever think you're going to be a yoga instructor? Because you know how, life starts, and how did you just morph into becoming that, that yin and yang?
Yes, exactly. No, I never would have anticipated that I'd be a yoga instructor. As a kid, I was really an introvert. I was really happy to be reading and always striving for good grades. I really prioritized academics, but I did not like to go outside. I didn't really love physical activity. I was that little girl that never even dared to try a cartwheel. So it's pretty crazy now that here I am 56 doing headstands and handstands. It's been a really funny transition for me.
So are you originally from Florida or are you from North?
Actually, I grew up in Maine. And then went to the Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland, right out of high school.
Whoa, so, you went to the Navy Academy?
I did, yes.
Midshipman Army, big Navy.
No, I was a midshipman. And I was in one of the earliest classes of women, which presented some real struggles. A lot of the guys didn't want us there. What I didn't know, I really had no military background in my family, but what's pretty common is to have these military legacies where you have granddad and dad and now the son have all graduated from Annapolis. And there were many classmates who had the attitude of, there were no women here when my granddaddy was here, and there were no women here when my daddy was here, and you shouldn't be here. So you encountered a lot for the first time in my life, really. It was the first time that I was told there were things I could not do because of my sex.
Wow.
And yes, I know. And I think anytime that you have a part of the population, just 1/10 of the population of midshipmen were women, that can bring problems. And unfortunately, I had a couple of really tough upperclassmen that were really hard on me. They didn't like the way that the women looked in the uniforms. Guys had those big shoulders and all that stuff. Well, women were built differently. And so,
your uniforms were cut because you were in probably about the same time I was in, so going through the same process because we're the same age bracket. So the uniforms were actually cut for men, and you guys were wearing men's uniform that weren't cut at the waistline for women. So that was one problem. And then the other problem is that the standards, how they looked at it, was where the standards were back in the day, caused a lot of conflict. And that's a whole diatribe on. Like the Shannon issue down at Citadel of you guys breaking into the ranks of going to the academy. And you're right, legacy does kind of matter because I know it's like all my friends that went to the academy, all their dads were officers. All that went to West Point, all their grandfathers were officers, and they literally just like the Air Force, they all just walked into the academy because they were legacy.
Correct. And actually there was a term for it at Navy. We called it the Ring Knockers Club.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
In the upper ranks, you really couldn't get promoted. I shouldn't say you couldn't get promoted, but you were at a real disadvantage if you weren't an Annapolis grad. in the Navy.
Yeah. Oh no, you're absolutely right. So how did that help you build your resiliency? Or, going into, before we even get into yoga, because this is a really good topic to talk about. So going through those transgressions, and I always tell people, this has nothing to do with feminism, it has nothing to do with gender. This has to do with, as a person, how did you fight over those challenges and say, you know what, I'm as good as anybody here, and it has nothing to do with my gender, but who I am?
That's a great question, Vince. The resilience or the grit of I'm here because for me, it became, I'm just as qualified. I'm just as smart as these guys. And I'm going to prove them wrong. I am going to graduate and I want to be one of those women. At the time, they were trying to kind of knock us off one at a time, get us processed out. So when first semester of my first year came, there were some more obvious targets who were women that all the upper class focused on, but then roll around and they were successful in getting them out for, different things.
Oh yeah, I got you. Yeah. Here's the deal. You don't blatantly have to do anything. You just got to set conditions and then be able to say the evaluation falls in this line because this person didn't do that. Hey, after 30 years in the military, I'm not going to knock on my service, but let me tell you, there are ways to be able to eliminate a person out of a service without being blatant about it.
Right. So at any rate, January of my, second semester there, I had a couple of upperclassmen who just decided that I was too close to my weight limit. Now, I wasn't over my weight limit, but they didn't like the way that I looked in my military uniform. And unfortunately, these guys were like 20, 21, really too young to have the amount of control that they had. And so we ate dinner down family style on squad tables, and they could control what I had access to eat. So I was on a serious starvation diet.
What?
I know. I could only have salad. I could only drink water.
You must have thought you were in the 1950s.
Right. And then what was crazy, Vince, which I didn't believe at the time, my grades started to slip. They were really drilling me on my military knowledge and things like that. But now I know that it was a part of my really poor nutrition, that I didn't have the brain function that I needed. But at any rate,
so your grades started. Hold on, real quick. So your grades started slipping because you were kind of stressed, and then second, you're not getting enough nourishment.
Right. Exactly.
So what did you get your degree in?
I ended up getting a Bachelor of Science in English, but at Annapolis, we took a lot of engineering classes. So that's why it was a Bachelor of Science. But everything, like coming from a public school in Maine and now having to take Calculus 1, Calculus 2, Calculus 3, differential equations, I was a little bit out of my element.
Right, because you go like me. I got a degree in history, but when I became an officer, I started having to take stats, calculus, and I hated math. And trust me, the fact that I made it as far as I did, I
know.
I had to work hard.
I had to work hard too, but I was really there for the free education, and all of these other classmates of mine were there because they wanted to be career Navy officers or they really wanted to be engineers. I was just looking at it as very naively. I don't want to have college debt. I know my parents can't help me out. So I was hugely a fish out of water. But going back
real quick, did you take ROTC in high school? JROTC in high school?
No.
No, so you definitely went in for baptism of fire.
Yes, I knew nothing about the military. I didn't know anything about the ranks. I didn't know the difference between officer and enlisted. So, and I got into West Point. I got into Navy. I picked Navy because I liked the uniforms better. So believe it or not, sight unseen, I had never seen either of these schools. I just knew that they were free. So my story is so unlike anybody else's story. It's crazy. Oh my
gosh.
That's hilarious. But I got to give it to you. You took it. You ran with it, and you did what you had to do. I give you much credit.
Yeah. But at any rate, okay. So then my mindset coming from the family that I did, we were New Englanders. You don't ask for anybody for help. You got through it on your own. I just sucked it up. I didn't tell anybody. And I know you know this, Vince, too. Like in the military, bad stuff goes on. And you almost just go, and okay, now how am I going to deal with it? Right. Well,
Yes, you did
so
cowboy up.
I know, but we don't understand. Think at the time, okay, I'm tough. I'm just going to suck it up. I'm going to do my best and I'll get through it. But that comes at a cost to us, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. All it started to work against
Oh
me.
yeah, well, I mean, it takes a part of you, because especially if it touches your moral code and you're trying to get through certain things. So if you went through this, how many years did you have? Did you do the minimum of 8 years?
I did. Oh, yes, exactly. So for me at the time, I graduated in '89. We only had a 5-year active duty commitment, 3-year reserve.
Right.
And because of what I went through with the upperclassmen and just always feeling like I needed to apologize for being in the room because I was a woman at Navy. There were lots of classes where I would walk in and I was the only girl in the room.
Oh, I know that feeling, being the only minority in the room. People don't understand it. I'm like, you don't realize when you walk in there and I'm in a room full of generals and I'm it.
Right.
And I'm like, did we just miss a mark? Because there's like 1 million people in this program, and it doesn't make sense. The numbers don't add up.
Exactly. The numbers do not add up. But with that comes the further burden that you're very well aware that you represent your minority group. You can't screw up. So I always felt like the stakes were a little higher, because if I did anything to embarrass myself, it wasn't just me, it was women in uniform.
That's that's a lot of truth to be said about that. Someone told me, an enlisted soldier said this when I first got in, and he goes, "Look, there's not a lot of minority officers in the officer corps." So he goes, "You're an ambassador." He says, "So unlike all the other guys, you don't have the same latitude, and if you understand that at the very beginning, your life will be easier. It's when you want to say, well, look what they're doing, and I did it. It's the same." He goes, "Do not go down that road. Whatever you do." And that was the best advice someone had ever gave me.
Right. It is really good advice. But I don't know if you also ran into if you would have an achievement that sometimes there was, oh, he got the skin waiver. He got promoted because he's a minority. For the women, it was, oh, she got retained. She's able to stay, or she got promoted because she's sick. It's very demeaning the way that they would do that, not realizing we were working just as hard as anybody else.
But they don't see that. Yeah, but people don't see that. They're wrapped up into their own world, because when I made general, so many people were like, "Oh, well, they got to have one," But they would say it without even, like, "Oh, really?" But no filter,
No. Yes, I know. And it's hurtful. So here we are, we're getting promoted or we're getting an award and we're diminished. And that's another thing that we suck up.
Right.
Like we're internalizing that. It's like, even when I'm doing well, people are shooting me down. So if I make a mistake, I'm ashamed, deeply ashamed of it. But even when I get promoted, I know I'm going to have people talking badly about me. So I just really felt like I never had those highs. But like you asked, okay, so I got out of Annapolis and then thought, oh, well, when I get out into the fleet, it'll be better. And it was better. But I also had a chip on my shoulder because of what I encountered at the Naval Academy.
Because of the collateral damage at the academy. So now you're bringing some baggage.
Right. So my thinking very much became, okay, I'm going to get out. I'm going to get out of the Navy as soon as my commitment is up. I hate this place. I just hate being the only woman in the room wearing the bars, knowing that people are talking about me all the time. But plus, one thing that we didn't cover yet was when I was at Annapolis during my first year there and I was on that starvation diet, I could get off campus 1 day a week, which was on Saturdays. And so on Saturdays, I was starving. and I would go out and just eat whatever I wanted. But I knew I had to come back and weigh in, right? So I had a roommate who would binge and purge. So I developed that same
Oh, bad
daily.
habit.
Oh yes, it became exactly. So Saturdays for me were about getting as much food. I remember like Friday nights laying in bed thinking, okay, what am I going to eat tomorrow? Because I had that starvation mindset of I've had nothing. And then I was hoping once I got out of my plebe year, that's the first year there. Okay, it's going to get better, right? These guys aren't going to be making me weigh in publicly. They aren't going to be like, I had one upperclassman, as you talk about how the uniforms were tailored, he would run his hand down the back of my neck all the way to my bottom to make sure my tuck was appropriate.
Whoa.
I know, these were the
Today you'd be gone.
Exactly, Vince. And then as a woman, I stood there and, at attention, and I sucked it up. So all of this stuff was inside me and I never dealt with it because you don't talk about that stuff when you're a minority.
And you're an introvert too. So that's I didn't mean to cut you off, but you're an introvert. And, and the sad thing about it is I've seen two sides of this. I've seen some people they go through it and then they get out, and I see people that they go and then they have this chip, and it's like every meal after that they just they just lay into as they get up in rank. They keep yanking rank, and you go like, what did I do to her? But it's stuff she's carrying back from way back in the day that it happens with minorities too, that they get the situation now that I'm in charge, and I had to be very cautious of that. So once I got in charge, I had to say, my grandfather said this great thing one day. We were on the porch, and he goes, look, the situation happened at the house, and one of my cousins said, you know what, all white people are evil and racist. And my grandfather popped him in the back of the head, and he goes, no. He goes, those gentlemen were, not everybody. He says, you can't put everybody in the same boat. And that way you need to be able to stay focused. And that's what I try to remind myself. After everything I've been through in my career, I've always reminded myself, everybody does need to not fall in the same category. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I know exactly what you're saying. Because when I got stationed at Miramar, Naval Air Station Miramar, and
I'm good.
I know, right? Top Gun. I got assigned to a fighter squadron. All of the guys in this, it was me and guys, but all of those guys had already made they'd been school number 1, number 2, they'd all been sea-based. So they were senior lieutenants, and here I am, this 22-year-old ensign walking in, but those guys were fabulous. I can't say enough. So in some regards, I do feel badly that I just was counting down the days to be able to get out of the Navy, because my experience in the Navy was so much more positive than the Naval Academy. But I could not shake that eating disorder. And so, here it developed because I had these unrealistic expectations by some upperclassmen. But then once that behavior kind of gets ingrained in you, that became my way of dealing with the stress and trauma. Was, the food kind of calms you, similar, it changed my mood. So I would get through my day and then could eat what I wanted at night, but I was always super conscious of, I can't gain weight. I have to be that woman in the uniform who looks good.
Wow, but that was the 90s, in the late 80s, early 90s. That was the personas, because I still remember people that looked really good in uniform and they were horrible. But first impressions, everybody go, "Oh my God, he looks so good in uniform. He's got to be squared away." And the dude was a box of rocks. But I'd be like, "But he does look good in uniform."
Yeah.
So let me ask you this: so, how did you get into yoga, and then why did you pick the style you picked?
Okay, so I got into yoga because when I was in the Navy as an officer, I sought treatment for the eating disorder at Balboa Naval Hospital. And those guys had no idea what to do with me because there just weren't that many women. And then I was self-referring for an eating disorder. So that wasn't something they were used to dealing with. But one of the therapists said, yoga is proving to be beneficial for women who struggle with eating disorders. So in 1991, I picked it up. I was in San Diego. It kind of hard to find a yoga class at that time. It was the early days. Mostly it was the hippies that did yoga.
Because Jane Fonda was stepping on boxes and doing
that was Jane Fonda and her exercise videos, right?
Right.
But so what I did, because I couldn't find a yoga class nearby, I just bought a bunch of different yoga videos. Allie McGraw at the time, and then like Kathy Smith and Denise Austin, they were all hopping on the yoga bandwagon, and started just doing them at home. And I noticed that it did help me to settle and relax. So I carried, and I did feel the benefit. And one of the interesting things I know now is, in the eating disorder circles, if a woman self-refers for treatment, typically the only type of exercise they will let you do would be walking and yoga, because of the non-competitive nature of it. Because folks with eating disorders are always comparing themselves in the gym. They're looking and they're aspiring to be something else. But through the non-competitive nature of yoga, women people with eating disorders will end up actually feeling happy in their bodies, because it works mind, body, and spirit. So no competition. And then at the end of a workout, you feel that little, we call it the yoga glow of, wow, I worked mind, body, and spirit. I feel better.
So what's your favorite method in yoga then?
Okay. So for me, being a hard charger initially, I gravitated toward the power classes.
Okay, so what is power class yoga?
I wanted to feel like I worked out. I wanted to be strong. And then I started to gravitate toward the really hot, rapid classes like hatha yoga, flow type yoga, vinyasa.
I haven't progressed to that yet. I'm still working through the stretching part.
Yeah, no, but the stretching part is so beneficial. So when I got my teacher training certification, I initially started teaching all flow classes, which have a definite cardio element to it. The teacher will put together a sequence, taking you around your mat, repeating some of the different poses. And I enjoyed that very much. In fact, I will still teach those types of classes pretty frequently. I started doing it like teaching in church groups, teaching at schools, and really noticed one thing that was interesting. And I know, Vince, you work a lot with youth. When I was teaching high school and middle school, I had a principal who was terrific about asking me to share yoga with the kids. Well, I went in to teach these students. I'm thinking hard charger, high schoolers, middle schoolers, they're going to want to do a very athletic form. So that's what I went in to teach. And these kids were like, no, Mrs. Whitley, we really need the calm. We want to, the kids were dealing with so much stress.
Yes, absolutely. My son does yoga.
Awesome. That's great. That's terrific.
Yep. He leads the class sometimes. It's unbelievable. So
yeah,
I'm surprised. I'm like, what the hell?
I know. Even like teaching the soccer team. I figured the soccer team would be joking like, oh, this is yoga. This is going to be so easy. What a waste of time. No, those young men were asking me, please, could we slow it down a little bit and spend more time on the stretches? That's what I really need.
Well, this generation, Kristen, I think they're struggling with a lot of mental struggles because social media has brought an element to our society that we've never had before. And so a lot of these kids are dealing with just a lot of stress, but a lot of it's self, but also reflective. Like we used to look at Vogue magazine back in the day, all the women needed to be skinny or Venus or swimsuits or whatever it was. And every girl had to look that way. And I told somebody one day, I was talking to my daughter, I said, look at my yearbook. If you can find an overweight person, show me one. And I said, and she goes, well, Dad, there's no overweight people in your yearbook, but maybe one or two. I said, because but here's the thing is a lot of these girls had eating disorders.
Right.
I said, and because of our society. So I like the fact that you're saying that how yoga kind of helps these young students with their stress. And I wish it should be a part of a PE class. I really think at the high school level, instead of just always rolling basketballs out or doing what they do, I honestly believe that they really should have yoga as part of the curriculum, because I think the kids would do better.
I agree with you. In fact, there's a company that I did some training with called Yoga Ed. And Yoga Ed, this woman, she was a yoga teacher. She went into some inner city high schools in LA, and she started teaching these kids yoga, and their grades went up, and truancy went down. It was crazy. So she started doing teacher trainings, and I went through and did, her preschool training, elementary school, and then high school. And it's interesting because even the boys, when I would go in to teach, they would say, Miss Whitley, it was so fun.
That's right. So now you got a bunch of old folks, and in my class, we got a bunch, we're all up in age up there,
Yes.
bones creaking, and not everything bends like it's supposed to, or folds
Right,
where it needs to. So, so what made you pick the style you have right now in the meditation? What made you kind of lean towards, because I see that's helping a lot of people with a lot of mental stress that they have, or stress from work and different things. So what kind of made you go into that realm now, as opposed to getting away from hot yoga and all the high intense cardio kind?
Sure. So I love teaching the yin yoga specifically because it allows me to share so much of the yoga philosophy and the mental health benefits. In a hatha class, when you're flowing so quickly, the focus is on the asana or the poses. And there is always some little level of competition there. You want to get in there and you want to do well, but primarily the focus is the physical practice. But then with yin, I have learned how very important it is to have balance in our lives, and to not only always be striving, but take that time to settle and stretch and nourish as we say with yin, not just your muscles, but actually take the time to nourish the connective tissue and your joints, which are going to carry you through the rest of your life. And then through that time, because we are holding the poses longer, I can then share a lot of the yoga philosophy that has been so very beneficial to me in my recovery and just handling life's crises, or the stresses of life.
Well, I know one thing: the playlist matters. So how do you pick your playlist?
Okay, so for my playlists, one thing when I first started teaching yin yoga, a lot of it was really yoga-y music, and I found that could turn some level of my population off. So then I started looking for classical music, and then that kind of that was a bummer. So now what I use instrumental versions of more contemporary songs. Like I have a lot of instrumental Pink Floyd, Fleetwood Mac, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so it makes the time go by better. When you're holding poses for 3 to 5 minutes, sometimes the little mental element of, wait a minute, who's this song?
I know.
It helps you out, right? When you're in an uncomfortable position.
Hey, so before we get out of here, if you have to leave your imprint in the sand, and you covered a lot of great information, what advice would you give? And not seriously, I went to the target audience. I would love to have this too. Is younger people. What would you tell a young woman, that younger version of you now? What would you tell her? That everything you know now, what would you tell your younger self?
Okay, I would tell my younger self to make time to care for myself, to get to know myself, not to try to be pleasing everybody else. That it is just as important to nurture your spirit as it is to keep striving to achieve. Achievements only matter if they are personally resonant with you. You cannot climb any ladder to happiness.
That is true.
Right? Exactly. At least for me. And in the military, you always think, okay, once I get out of college, I'm going to be happy. Once I get to be a lieutenant, I'm going to be happy. No, you do not climb the ladder to happiness. You need to do what it takes today to find satisfaction and wellness in the moment. And that's a huge thing about yoga too.
Oh, love it, Kristen. Love it. Hey, we appreciate you coming on Embrace the Power. And hey, guys, before we roll out of here, just check out 24 Hour Works down in Boyette. They're a great place. Oh, by the way, they're right next door to Kristen's yoga studio. And with that being said, Kristen, me and Mike G always say, how we doing, Mike? Keep it